You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Monday. We are back in Doing It, Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I am your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. I think, as usual, I have to apologize for being light on content. Last week we did 3 episodes. There is a very valid explanation. It's life stuff. I'll tell you guys about it after the Ohio State game at some point. But hopefully we will not be intermittent this week. Can't rule it out because, like I said, it's life stuff. It isn't just the typical too busy. And it's going to be a busy week, but we're going to try to do 5, including Thanksgiving Day. We'll have the mailbag then. We will have a crossover with Jay Williams from Locked On Buckeyes on Wednesday. Figure out tomorrow, Friday. We will do as best as we can. We'll do a preview episode. So that is the plan. No post game is the plan. But let's talk about the Illinois game. Then let's get into Ohio State and general Monday press conference stuff, right? So, obviously, Michigan found itself in its first real dogfight of the season against Illinois. And I don't think that you can be terribly surprised given what happened to Blake Corum. Michigan was on route, I think, to start kind of opening the game up at that point. When he got injured, turned the ball over, all of that stuff. I'd have to look back to see exactly what the score was at that moment. It felt like they were starting to just turn on. Then you have you have the injury, you have the fumble, all of that, and it's not exactly what you want, right? So they were up 7-3. That's what they went into halftime with. Kind of felt like they were going to go up 14-3. Didn't turn out that way. They were absolutely holding Illinois on offense. Illinois was able to do next to nothing. Obviously, they got a field goal, but they had 2 3-and-outs in a row, a turnover on downs on a 44-yard drive, a field goal on a 59-yard drive, and then ended the half 6 plays, 10 yards. And then they got a 3-and-out to start the next. And then Michigan's defense kind of struggled for 2 drives, right? 9 plays, 67 yards, 3 plays, 63 yards. And then after that, the defense clamped down for the most part again. But this is the first time that we haven't really seen the second half adjustments kind of work out for Michigan. And I know a lot of people are complaining about the run defense. I mean, Chase Brown went into the game leading the country in rushing yards overall. So that's that. I understand that generally things, you hope that things go a little bit better, especially kind of given what Michigan's been. But it is the week before Ohio State. You have some, not only just key injuries in game, so many injuries of guys being held out. I do want to look before I move on to that next thought. This was the second worst game for Chase Brown all season long. So it's the 4th worst. He had 108 against Chattanooga. He had 129 against Wisconsin. He had only 98 against Purdue, but 140 against Michigan. In terms of yards per carry, it was actually pretty good at 4.83. But those types of things are going to happen sometimes when you're going up against talent. But when it was the coming down to waning moments of the game, I'm looking out at the lineups. I'm looking out at the personnel that Michigan's fielding, and I'm like, this is insane. And I'm thinking, I think Mike Morris and Scooney could play if this was Ohio State, but Michigan might lose this game. These guys are sitting on the sidelines. I'm looking out and seeing names in a very pivotal situation that haven't really been out there, right? Like Matthew Hibner. You're going, no offense against Matthew Hibner, but it just did not feel like Michigan was going to win that game. You usually have a pretty good pulse of whether or not Michigan's going to win the game or not. Did not have it in this one. I don't think you can take away from the fact that Illinois is a good team. I mean, if they would have won the game, they'd end up being ranked probably around like 20 or something, and then they'd win. They're going to win against Northwestern this next week and probably would have finished out the season ranked in the top 15 or so. So I don't think that Illinois is a bad team, right? We went into the week, the Nebraska week, with the expectations that this was going to be a ranked matchup. But I mean, even the week before, and then Illinois somehow loses 2 games improbably that it shouldn't have. But Michigan found a way, and they found it with players that we haven't seen them have to count on. And you have to give them credit for being in that situation, because for as much hand-wringing as there might be over this, and certainly the health factor is a big part of it, which I think is actually crucial. We'll get to that in the bottom end. But at the same time, they got tested like this multiple times last year. From the Nebraska game, of course, on the road. Obviously, it's different playing Illinois at home and that being the case. So certainly they had that moment at least. And then they obviously had lost to Michigan State. This team, I feel like, kind of needed a little bit of that gut check, because we hadn't really known how will they respond if they find themselves in a situation like this. So now we know. But so many guys were out. We saw only a handful return. We saw Kalel Mullings return. But I wonder who's going to be available for Ohio State. That's going to play the big difference. My confidence level certainly is not nearly as strong as it was. I figured it would probably go down the week of the game regardless. But when you're talking about key guys maybe being out, then it really changes the script. Thankfully, if you're paying attention to what's going on in Columbus, they have a lot of key guys out as well. The pass game for Michigan, as much as we want to sit there and say it's not good, and it wasn't great, but it was okay when it mattered. Not good, not great, okay when it mattered. Because they could not run the ball a lick with the 3 guys who generally have not played, right? You generally have no confidence, if no offense to Isaiah Gash, but if Isaiah Gash is the one out there trying to win you a game, we really haven't seen anything from him other than a touchdown against Hawaii, right? And that's generally not going to work out that well. Now, they might rave about him behind closed doors, but the distance between even CJ Stokes and Isaiah Gash, I think, is pretty big. Still, he made a couple really big plays down the stretch. So that's good news for Michigan. And that's good news even for him in the sense of building confidence that he can do something like that, even after the drop, getting them going right back to him and getting a big first down, where if he didn't get that first down, things probably don't turn out very well for Michigan, right? That does bode well in case for whatever reason he ends up having to be relied upon in Columbus, right? It's one of those things where we saw multiple teams struggle. Michigan was not the only one in Week 12 that struggled. It seemed like just about every top team struggled against competition everyone expected them to beat, whether it was Georgia, whether it was Ohio State, whether it was TCU, whether it was, Tennessee flat out lost. There were a lot of teams that did not come away with wins out of this week that were certainly expected to. North Carolina. So I think that it is incumbent upon Michigan to regroup, and it seems like they are, and I have some thoughts on that, but let's turn our attention straight to Ohio State, and then we're going to get back to some of my thoughts on that here in a few moments. And then I pulled up the wrong thing here. So this episode of Locked On Wolverines is brought to you by SimpliSafe. Now listen, did you know that over the holidays, property crimes like burglaries and package thefts spike nationally? That's why our friends at SimpliSafe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system so that more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season. Order your SimpliSafe system for half off today and enjoy advanced security and greater peace of mind this holiday season. Here's why I love it, is because no matter where you live, I have lived in the country, in the boondocks, in the middle of nowhere is where I grew up. I have lived here in Ann Arbor. I've lived in Los Angeles. I've lived in Belleville. I've lived in Flint. I've lived in Clio. I've lived all over the place. I have experienced some kind of mischievousness, no matter where I've lived, even when my neighbors were a half mile down the road, either side, I've had my car broken into. I had my leather coat stolen. SimpliSafe alleviates all of that, having that SimpliSafe system. It's their advanced technology that you can control your system from your phone with the app, watching the crystal clear HD live stream from your security cameras, a wide variety of high-tech sensors or something else. There's just multiple things. Now, SimpliSafe was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News World Report, third year in a row. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real so you can get a priority police response. Don't miss your chance to save big, and I'm the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off of any new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/locked-on-college. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplisafe.com/locked-on-college. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, let's continue on here. We need to talk about the challenges that Ohio State presents. Now, they have their injury issues themselves, right? Jackson Smith-Njigba has missed most of the year. So, in essence, he's like their Ronnie Bell. He's been essentially a complete non-factor this year. So, in a lot of ways, you can look at him and say, well, if he plays, he plays. If he doesn't play, he doesn't play. Doesn't really do a heck of a lot in terms of expectations, right? But I mean, certainly if he plays and he's closer to full strength, if they're playing possum, he can go out there, then that might make a big difference. He's got 5 catches for 43 yards so far on the year, right? He's not the same threat as Harrison or Egbuka are at this juncture, of course, given that they have been out there all the time. But I don't know that I put too much credence into CJ Stroud limping near the end of the game. I mean, JJ McCarthy was limping throughout a lot of the Rutgers game, right? It's just kind of that time of year. But Travion Henderson, Mayan Williams both didn't play, or well, I think one of them played for a little bit. I think Travion played for a little bit, and then it was the Dallin Hayden show. He was obviously very good, but he's doing so against the 70th ranked run defense in the country. So it's not like Maryland. He basically rushed to expectations against Maryland. That's what 140 or so yards per game is what Maryland tends to give up, right? So yes, he was very good. He did what you would expect an Ohio State running back, no matter the level, to do against a team like Maryland. But Maryland gave them all they could handle, and I think I thought it was really funny just kind of seeing some of the national reactions from that game, where it was like, Michigan had to survive. Ohio State, I mean, we all knew they were going to win, right? Considering that Maryland had the ball with a chance to win the game with seconds left, I mean, and the explosive offense came back to play, right? That doesn't bode well for Ohio State's defense. But anything can happen next week, right? Does Ohio State's defense come to play? If it does, Michigan might be in trouble given the injuries issues, right? If Michigan had the same type of health and they act confident, but I would have loved to have seen the confidence that they had like in Iowa game, where they just moved the ball early and often before they just kind of shut it down. I do think that Ohio State still has some of those issues, right? We saw the defense kind of getting taken advantage of in the pass game, so maybe Michigan's going to need to get involved in the pass game. Which, I mean, they're still saying, hey, we're doing it perfectly in practice, just not translating in games for some reason. So they have that. As far as Michigan's defense against Ohio State, I mean, they just lost their starting right guard. I believe their center is a little bit banged up, but is still playing. That could bode really well for that interior. I look for Mozzie Smith and Mason Graham to have big games, and that might be really difficult to run the ball. You can make them one-dimensional in terms of that. But again, CJ Stroud was just kind of ho-hum. He was all right. Now, does he step things up in a big way in a rivalry game? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, he passed for a lot of yards last year against Michigan, and Michigan held him back enough. But Michigan's going to need to be able to get pressure. Michigan's going to need to get him off of his spot. Still, even then, you're going to see some incredible plays by some of those receivers. But at the same time, I'm not convinced that Marvin Harrison, as good as he is, and he is very, very, very good, or Emeka Egbuka are on the same level of either Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson, at least last year. Now, the numbers might suggest that he's at least a Garrett Wilson type. They have similar stats: 11 games, 65 receptions, 1,037 yards, 11 touchdowns at 15.95 yards per catch for comparison. Last year, Garrett Wilson, the second leading receiver, 11 games, 70 catches, 10.58, 15.11, 12 touchdowns. So those two are on the same level, but they had Jackson Smith-Njigba and Chris Olave. Smith-Njigba had 1,600 catches last year. Olave had, or 1,600 yards. Chris Olave had just under 1,000. So Egbuka might be kind of like Olave. Essentially, he's right there. Similar stats. But Olave was a little bit more tested and proven. Certainly Egbuka can come out there and do it. But then Jackson Smith-Njigba is the big difference. Kate Stover's been very good. That's been a big help for them. Julian Fleming has stepped up. But looking down their list, it's not quite as it just, to me, it's not as impressive, right? And considering what we know about Olave as well as Garrett Wilson, I mean, those guys were electric. We've seen the Ohio State team struggle from a lot more than Michigan has over the course of the year. And Michigan's style might be boring. Ohio State's style might be exciting. Ohio State's style has allowed them to really pile on once they tend to get a lead. At times, did not happen against Maryland. This will be the best defense that they have faced in Michigan. Certainly this will be the best offense Michigan has faced. So I am very curious to see how that all plays out. But again, with a lot of the injury issues they have, if they are one-dimensional in the run game, again, playing Michigan's run defense is different than playing Maryland's. So if they have to rely on Dallin Hayden, barring the idea of maybe you haven't as much film on this guy, and you have different things kind of schemed up, it might change that a little bit, but it's different than a quarterback, And I am curious to see how this all plays out. All right, I have more thoughts on this, especially coming out of the press conference. There's something that just seems really, I don't want to say off, because it's not off, right? Off is the wrong word. It's intriguing to me. There's something incredibly intriguing to me about what transpired at this press conference. We're going to get to it here in just a moment, but listen, this week's thrilling moment in college football is brought to you by Nissan. The thrilling designs behind the new lineup from Nissan are intended to empower drivers and vehicles as well as capable as the drivers themselves. When I think of unbelievable abilities on the field for this week's thrilling moment, it has to be Jake Moody down the stretch. 2 field goals in pressure-filled situations, finally getting his walk-off field goal to win the game, right? That is a pressure-filled situation. And he went out and drilled that final one to give Michigan the final lead, to kill the upset, to keep Michigan undefeated, and became the most prolific field goal kicker in Michigan football history. So this segment has been inspired by the thrilling new designs featured across Nissan's new lineup of vehicles. Pursue what thrills you in the all-new Frontier, Armada, or Pathfinder today. Available now at nissanusa.com. All right, let's finish us out here with talking a little bit more, first off, about the press conference, and then I'll give you some kind of early thoughts here. And then I'm going to start preparing for this Blake Corum AMA, which by the time any of you watch or listen to this, that will be in the rear view. But fret not, there will be a replay on my personal YouTube page. So that will happen. Everything will be fine. If you miss it, you just won't necessarily partake in it. Yeah, there's something weird that I felt came out of the press conference. And that something weird was Jim Harbaugh. So we had our Monday press conference with Jim Harbaugh, and he was just, normally in these rivalry press conferences, Ohio State especially, he's very dry and very curt. It's the Matt Damon, don't say what Brad Pitt to Matt Damon in Ocean's 11. Don't say 5 words when 3 will do. Generally, that's how he is, and he started out that way. But he was kind of, in a way, very ebullient, very enthusiastic. He was very just kind of excitable in some ways. And especially when talking about Ohio State, it almost kind of came across to me like it was speaking of pride, but about Ohio State. Asked about like C.J. Stroud and Marvin Harrison. He's just like, those guys are so good. Man, they are so good. And, talking about Ohio State, are they tough now? Oh, absolutely. They're so good. They are so good. And I'm not saying he was being disingenuous, but it reeked to me as a partial observer, having been at nearly every Jim Harbaugh, weekly press conference, post-game press conference in his entire tenure. I've probably missed a couple post games, probably like 6. And I haven't missed, I don't think, a Monday press conference all year, or not all year, but since he's been in Ann Arbor. Never seen him kind of have those types of reactions, which makes me kind of feel to some degree that Michigan's playing possum a little bit. Now, the health thing certainly scares me, and there's a laundry list. I've seen people on message boards say Junior Colson. I don't know. I'd never heard of that. I guess he didn't finish the game. I mean, I saw him today, and he was literally running in the parking lot. I would imagine that he's probably okay, but I guess that's not necessarily the best indicator. But, it's not like when I saw Luke Schoonmaker a couple weeks ago and he had a sling on his arm. But I kind of have the feeling that Michigan's doing a lot of subterfuge. I had that feeling based off the conversations I had, which essentially there are elements of it that seem pretty likely that they are doing some subterfuge. But then you think about the personnel that was out there. And was Michigan really that unhealthy, right? I mean, maybe not. Is Michigan going to lose a game? Not on, obviously not on purpose, but kind of on purpose? No, I don't think so. But it's just his demeanor when it came to talking about Ohio State, and it just seems so odd. It's a complete contrast, of course, from Ryan Day. Ryan Day after Maryland being like, he's scarred by what happened last year. And, it's just this whole thing. And meanwhile, Jim Harbaugh is describing Ohio State and Michigan players alike as superheroes and just like this lavish praise that's heaped upon the rival. It just seemed really bizarre. I think that I always think this, and generally have been proven wrong except for last year, that Michigan's got something up its sleeve. Certainly it's confident. I know it's confident based off some conversations I had before the game. But obviously that's before losing a couple players, including your most important player in Blake Corum. Now, with Corum, obviously I'm going to talk to him here in a moment. I've been told that we are not going to address the knee situation, and that's his prerogative, of course. But if Harbaugh comes out and says there's no structural issues, and I'm like, okay, well, that's good news, right? I understand it might hurt really bad, but I would imagine that there's no way you can keep him from the game. Donovan Edwards, I know that there's some conflicting info. I would still bet on him playing. Whether they're 100% or not, it's just a matter of finding ways to make plays and, catching Ohio State off guard. Certainly, some of these other guys. I mean, Isaiah Gash, the play that he got the first down, and Jim Harbaugh said that was designed for Blake Corum. Gash should only run it once in practice. If they can somehow replicate some of that with some of those other players, then it might not be quite as explosive. It might not be quite as exciting, but it also might just work. We're going to find out if this clash of styles can still work with both teams being pretty banged up. But I do feel like there is some kind of gamesmanship going on here. And now there is some, which I can't divulge, in the manner, the way that it's going to unfold, if it is even going to work. Can't divulge that. But I feel like there's more gamesmanship that I don't even know about that Michigan is kind of playing here. And Harbaugh's press conference, which felt like very, very different than any other Ohio State week, and I've covered all of them. It's certainly different than any Michigan State week. It just felt different and weird, and I wonder what they're doing. Because I actually think, especially considering they're admitting we have been preparing, we have been game planning, we have been practicing for Ohio State. Remember, this is the team that every week is a championship week. Did Michigan maybe kind of also with Illinois? I understand the injury, I think, played a big part in it. But did Michigan kind of do what Ohio State did in 2018 when they didn't really prepare that much for Maryland? Did Ohio State maybe not prepare that much for Maryland and spend all their time preparing for Michigan? I don't know. It'll be interesting to say the least. I'm curious myself, and we'll see on Saturday. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We are going to continue on Tuesday. Again, I don't have any agenda. We're not going to be guest heavy this week. We're just going to kind of plow through and reassess next week as to how, about the team, because either Michigan will have another game or it won't until a bowl game, or we'll be getting prepared. But anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We'll be talking to you soon. Peace.